Hello, and welcome to the next in the Effective Writing Center series of workshops, our first of 2019. I'm Dan Gallagher, Director of the UWC. Today's workshop is titled The Power of Parallelism and is being presented by Kevin Folliard and Leanne Ruggiero. Kevin Folliard has been a writing advisor with UMUC's Effective Writing Center since 2010. He has a degree in English and Creative Writing from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and he has also published sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and young adult fiction. Leanne Ruggiero has been a writing tutor at the EWC since 2006. She is a professor of English at Great Falls College, Montana State University, and spends any time left over working on her own writing projects and staring out her window at Big Sky Country. To ask a question during the broadcast, please use the chat feature in YouTube below your viewing window. This workshop, like all of our workshops, will be archived for future viewing in the Effective Writing Center's Google Plus community, and you can also find it through this YouTube channel. And now let's begin tonight's workshop, Kevin.
Thanks, Dan. Just like the universe, nature, and a healthy lifestyle, good writing has balance. And one of the most important parts of balanced writing is parallelism. But what exactly is parallel structure when it comes to writing? In writing, parallelism means arranging words, phrases, and ideas in the same grammatically correct fashion. Parallel structure exists on many levels, in sentences, bulleted lists, paragraphs, and whole works of writing, large and small. Explaining and presenting information in a parallel style engages your audience, enhances clarity, ensures organization, and draws attention to important ideas. As we'll explore in just a bit, many great writers and speakers have used parallel structure to add emphasis to their messages. Parallel structure routinely inspires audiences, captures profound truths, and even shapes history. And when it's working, it creates writing that's so smooth, you probably don't even notice it. As a matter of fact, everything I just said has parallel structure. So how do we achieve parallel structure in writing? Well, it all starts with proper grammar, mechanics, and sentence structure. Leanne, why don't you walk us through some of the important grammatical rules for achieving parallel structure in lists and sentences?
Thanks, Kevin. Grammar rules exist to create clarity. Without following certain rules, writing can be confusing. This is especially true when it comes to parallelism, which is all about making ideas that are already similar appear similar. For example, if we're gearing up to write a list of items, they're already connected in one way, they're in the same list, but they also need to look the same. That is, they need to have the same structure within the sentence. Take, for example, these two songs, which contain famous lists. Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire, whose verses are lists of historical events, and Madonna's Vogue, whose bridge starts with a list of people who, well, vogue. Of course, these lists are more concerned with rhyme and rhythm than being perfectly parallel. Changes need to be made if we're going to write these lists in a college essay. For example, if we were going to revise this section of Vogue in order to stick it into an essay, we would use each person's first and last name in a list like this one. Greta Garbo, Marilyn Monroe, Marlene Dietrich, Joe DiMaggio, Marlon Brando, and Jimmy Dean are on the cover of a magazine. Having a parallel list in a sentence might mean all nouns, all verbs, all ing words or gerunds, all infinitives, which is a to plus a verb. Whatever the part of speech, keep it the same and make sure it lines up with that signal phrase. When you break that structure, it derails the sentence, causes mixed construction, and forces your reader to stop and puzzle over what you're saying. You also want to have parallel concepts. Ideas expressed in a list should be in the same category or on the same level or tier. For example, here's a sentence whose concepts aren't parallel. Our national parks are home to eagles, wolves, and majestic mountains. Everything in this sentence is true, but in this list of items, we have two animals and a geographical feature. This means that the mountains aren't really comparable to the animals, and to be honest, mountains don't really have homes anyway, at least not in the way we think of eagles and wolves as having homes. Listing only animals smooths out both the writing and the ideas in this sentence. Our national parks are home to eagles, wolves, and bears. It's not just specific items and concepts and lists that can be made parallel within a sentence. It's also phrases and clauses. Just like with lists, your writing will be clearer when the grammatical structure of the phrases or clauses in your sentences match or mirror one another. Here's an example of this from the Top 40, Panic at the Disco's High Hopes. In these lyrics, what Mama said is always a command. These commands are also independent clauses. In verse 1, Mama said, fulfill the prophecy, be something greater, go make a legacy. And in verse 2, she said, burn your biographies, rewrite your history, light up your wildest dreams. Here, the listed items are complete sentences rather than single items. We can also see parallel structure across a sentence in the second verse of Michael Jackson's Thriller. You hear the door slam and realize there's nowhere left to run. You feel the cold hand and wonder if you'll ever see the sun. You close your eyes and hope that this is just imagination. There's even a parallelism in the length of the clauses in these sentences. The first one is always shorter than the second. Now let's take a look at a sentence much like the ones from Thriller that isn't parallel. Our organization is committed to community service and wants to help the environment. Notice how each concept is worded differently. Independently, there's nothing wrong with either phrasing, but paired together, it makes for a disjointed sentence. If these ideas are phrased in parallel fashion, however, the sentence becomes stronger and clearer. For example, our organization is committed to social awareness and environmental justice, or our organization wants to build a better society and a cleaner earth. These are minor tweaks, but to the reader's eyes or a listener's ears, they make a big difference. Caution, though, you don't want to force it.
Thanks, Leanne. Sometimes as writers, we fall into the trap of creating long lists of many important ideas. But not every concept needs to be listed out together. If you're finding that you're having a hard time achieving parallel structure and a long list of ideas in a sentence, there's a good chance that you have complex ideas that deserve to be broken off into their own separate sentences and explained one at a time, apart from a list. For example, great white sharks are biologically built to be apex predators of the ocean due to their powerful jaws, rows of sharp teeth, sheer size, torpedo-shaped bodies, and extraordinary senses, which include a keen sense of smell and the ability to sense the bioelectricity of the other organisms around them. Now, this is all great information, but even if we technically can make this list parallel, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should. That last item is being forced into the list of ideas, and the reader needs a second to pause and to process the previous items. Listing a few parallel points, then transitioning to the more complex point is going to work best. For example, great white sharks are biologically built to be apex predators of the ocean due to their powerful sharp jaws and huge torpedo-shaped bodies, period. They also possess extraordinary senses, including a keen sense of smell and the ability to sense the bioelectricity of other organisms. Now, having said that, if you do have a long list that can readily achieve parallel style, it's often going to work better as a bullet point list. You might choose to integrate a list into a piece of prose writing like this version of our shark list. Just remember, the list must fundamentally function the same way that it would in a prose sentence. That means your signal phrase determines how you list out what follows. In the case of the shark list, each item needs to be a description anchored by a noun to complete that due to their signal phrase. But Leanne, will there always be a signal phrase in front of a bullet point list?
Good question. You won't always have a signal phrase in every document, of course, but to achieve parallel structure, it can help to behave as if there's an invisible signal phrase that you're sticking to. For instance, resumes work best when they favor strong, action-oriented verbs in bullet point lists. In this example, the writer is listing action-oriented duties from a previous job. There's no signal phrase, but there's still parallel structure because the writer has an imaginary signal phrase that each bullet is completing, which is I plus the conjugated verb. By imagining the I and sticking to past or present tense, depending on the job at hand, the applicant ensures a smooth, easy read for that hiring manager reviewing the resume. You actually don't need or want the I in your resume because it's redundant, but imagining that it's there but invisible will help you maintain lists that are consistent, organized, clear, and engaging.
Awesome tip. Thanks, Leanne. So far, we've mostly been talking about the grammatical nuts and bolts of parallel structure, but why does it work? Why is it important? To really appreciate the power of parallelism, it can help to see it in action. Many famous words and expressions stick out in our mind because they are phrased in parallel fashion. When a sentence has balance, the important ideas conveyed in that sentence become more memorable. Just check out these famous quotations. A penny saved is a penny earned. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Often wordiness and repetition can hinder your writing, but here's proof that repetition can and often does work if it has balance. These mirrored phrases strike a powerful chord in the audience because on either side of the phrase, the repeated word is presented in a different but equally important context. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously used parallelism in his I Have a Dream speech. The use of linguistic patterns and repetition helped Dr. King to emphasize the importance of his message. Let's take a close look at a few sections from this speech, and you'll notice the power of parallelism at work. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Notice how Dr. King creates a sense of urgency and a call to action by consistently prefacing important ideas with the phrase, now is the time. This tactic runs throughout the entire speech, using words to emphasize today, here, and now, to ground his audience in the moment and inspire them to action. But notice what's going on organizationally here. Beneath the gravity and the power of these words, we still have, that's right, a skeleton of perfect parallelism. Just like I said earlier, when it's working, the reader or listener doesn't notice it. It's very natural, and you'd never imagine Dr. King's famous speech as a bullet point list, and it's just best how it is, but the principle of balance and organization is there nevertheless. Here it is again. You probably know this section very well, but I bet you've never seen it like this. Parallel structure works. In fact, it moves the world. Parallel structure enhances clarity, engages audiences, and helps to underscore profound and important ideas. You see it in action in literature, poetry, theater, and more. Here's one of the most famous openings of any novel, Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Here Dickens uses parallel phrasing throughout this long sentence to underscore the paradoxical and confusing historical context of his setting. What makes this passage so memorable is its perfect balance and beautiful simplicity in emphasizing complex, confusing times. Now, most of us are not famous novelists, but what we say matters, and moreover, how we say it matters just as much. Whether you're writing a report for work, a cover letter, resume, email, giving a speech, or making a PowerPoint, bringing balance to your words will make them clearer, stronger, and more persuasive. And that is the power of parallelism. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Doesn't look like we have any questions at this point. I will reiterate that if you have questions while you're viewing this in the future, feel free to post them either in our Google Plus space or right on this video's page on YouTube. I want to thank Kevin and Leanne for an excellent explanation of parallelism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The EWC will be back in February with our next workshop. We hope to see you then. You can reach us at writingcenter@umUC.edu, and you can submit to the Writing Center through my UMUC at the Submit to Writing Center link. We will see you next time. Thank you.